let's talk about Neelam Ahooja and essentially her addressing the whole issue concerning the row. Now, for people that don't know, just a bit of background on like Neelam, who is she? Like Neelam Gill, but her IG is Neelam Ahooja, so I just call her. I know her as her IG name. But I think she's one of the most stylish people that makes like style sort of content. She first got on my radar because she was a collector of the row, and it was at the time that the row was really buzzing. A lot of people were into it, but not it wasn't as mainstream as now. So I found her content really interesting. She would talk about different pieces that she's getting from the row. She would review them, talk about the quality, talk about the fit, give style inspo tips concerning the row. So I kind of mentally, her as a person, I kind of found her synonymous with the row in my mind. It was kind of like, yeah, when you think of her, you just think of the row. And then recently, there was a lot of controversy online because apparently the row treated her badly. And so she decided to part ways with the row and not really work with the team anymore. Now, there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of misinformation that was shared online. And because of all this confusion and misinformation, she has actually gone out on a limb and posted her own video on YouTube responding to the whole situation. So I wanted to react to the video and kind of give my thoughts. I haven't actually watched it, so I wanted to watch it first time as I react to it so you can get my genuine thoughts.
If you're tuning in, it's possible you've seen a post or podcast about my breakup with the row. And I was reluctant to post this because I didn't want to give this topic any more attention. But there's a lot of misinformation out there. And the first rule of good journalism is you speak to the subject at the center of the story. But no one who's posted about this has spoken with me prior to publishing their take. And that choice leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation and clickbait type articles which generate a lot of attention. So as much as I don't want to give this more air, I feel like adding my perspective because I'm at the center. I published an open letter on Substack and publicly ended a very long, complicated relationship with the row. After 5 years of behind-the-scenes behavior, I felt my audience deserved to know the truth. I posted a detailed story behind a paywall for my closed community, and I did that for 2 reasons. One, because the information was so sensitive, and I needed a safe space to share it. And 2,
Before she continues, I do sense that like a lot of people don't know how the internet works sometimes, because it's like, yes, you shared that behind a paywall, but if it's a big enough story, like someone who is synonymous with the row talking about how they are parting ways with the row, of course people will post about it. She also wrote a detailed Substack about it, so there was not really much there was not really much you could clarify. Of course, some people turned it into something else. I do agree with what she's saying, but there wasn't really much to clarify based on if you read the whole Substack, to be honest.
closest supporters and the people who pay me to speak about the row needed to understand the pivot they were about to see and the shift in my tone. So let's back up. I've been collecting the row for some time. The label launched in 2006, but I didn't have a presence online back then, though I had pieces of the row in my closet. My professional background is corporate finance, and I left that career to focus on my kids. But when my kids grew up, they said, well, it's time for you now to do what you want to do. That was fashion, always has been. In October of 2020, I began posting a little here and there on Instagram. Other creators had already been sharing pictures of themselves in the row. I remember back then the Gaia sandals, the Ginza sandals, the zip boots were kind of trending online in that smaller community, and I thought how wonderful to have found a group of people with shared interests. The row themselves didn't have a significant presence online yet. They were early days, and the response to my account was overwhelming because I was doing a deep dive into the brand. This was around the time the row was going through.
I think so. A big reason why I think that her content does so well, apart from the fact that I think she's really stylish, is that a lot of people don't have that much money. And considering that she does, and she comes from like a finance background, she's one of the few people that can actually afford a lot of the stuff that people talk about. So with her, there was a lot of first-hand experience, a lot of coming from a collector's perspective that is quite rare because, I mean, how many people can afford to be collectors of the row? So that was a big reason and a big interest point as to why I think people are really interested in her content. So I think that needs to be mentioned.
Some financial uncertainty. Barney's had folded. They don't do traditional advertising, but content creators were, doing the good work on the street, spreading the word. The production was much smaller back then, not much in each offering, and everything felt very special because if you missed out on something, there was a good chance you'd never see it again. So in response to questions I was getting on sizing and styling, I began posting bite-sized detailed videos on specific items on YouTube. That's how my channel started. At the time, I didn't even consider myself an influencer. I had a very small audience. I didn't have partnerships with anyone. I never used affiliate links. It was a hobby for me. I was a stay-at-home mom sitting in my bedroom talking about the row. Post-pandemic, I went into their New York City store. That day, Ashley Olsen happened to walk in. I was deciding between 2 Margaux bags. They had plenty of them back then. And the rep I was working with and I decided to get her input on sizing. I was toggling between the 15 and the 17. So we spoke at length about the business, their strategy, factories, partners, all that stuff. And after I left the store, through my rep, she had extended an invite to the Paris show and the showroom. In Paris, at the showroom, I met what would be my contact for the next number of years. She's at the top of the organization and works with Ashley day to day. When we were speaking in the showroom, she quickly realized I had an in-depth knowledge and a deep interest in the brand, and she seemed to like that a lot. She gave me her number, she wanted to stay in touch, and that was the beginning of a long relationship. She'd text me, ask me for information, what my audience was keen on, and there was a general exchange of information between us. Stores were much quieter back then. There were no videos about products, no lineups outside the store, very little demand for the Margaux. I published a detailed Margaux video, and my rep told me that after that, the bags started to pick up. So I was pretty happy to hear that feedback because I didn't have a large reach, but my audience was niche and very focused on the row, and my work appeared to be influencing purchasing decisions. And I was one of the very few active voices on YouTube back then. So this is a good time to clarify this. The row doesn't work with influencers in any capacity.
So this is interesting. I didn't actually know that because I know she's been a collector of the row for a really long time, but I didn't know that she was one of the people at the forefront of making the Margaux what it was and being a desirable bag. Because when I remember the Margaux is when people started wearing it, and then all of a sudden you had all these magazines running articles saying that the Margaux is the modern Birkin, or it's the Birkin for if you know fashion people. It's the fashionable Birkin for people that are in the know. Like, those were the kind of articles they were running. That is really interesting to see that she was at the forefront of that. I also think it's crazy, and I know she'll get to it, how the row treated her, considering, one, she's damn near a VIP customer. 2, she's knowledgeable and really cared about the brand and really loved it. And 3, she had an audience of people that looked to her opinion on the row. But anyway, I digress.
There are no paid partnerships. There are no gifts outside of the usual VIP holiday gifts that may be sent to you by your rep for having spent a significant amount of money in the store. They also don't work with any affiliate platforms. So if I link items through third-party retailers, I generate commissions. But if I link to the row directly, I don't make anything. I also want to restate that I didn't initiate contact with them. They did. And when they saw the success of my channels, they began to make demands of me, asking me for things they weren't asking of other VICs or other content creators. And for the most part, I was compliant because I'm professional and I wanted to be respectful. But it did cross a line. I live in Toronto and travel to New York City a few times a year.
Also, that's the first mistake she made. So the first mistake she made, and I only know this because I'm a content creator, is once brands start asking things of you, contracts have to be signed and money has to be paid, or there has to be some sort of contractual agreement, because brands will always just take as much as they can get out of you, or they'll milk whatever they can get. Because if you think about it, Neelam's audience is like the perfect audience for the row to kind of do research. It's like an audience that loves the row, they're knowledgeable about the row, a lot of them buy the row. It's like a community for the brand run by someone who's a good ambassador for the brand. All of that stuff, it's just a bit fishy that they started asking stuff of her that they wouldn't ask of anyone else. That's the first red flag to me. That sounds a bit dodgy. That sounds really dodgy.
And I'd make sure to stop in at the boutique. I'd be pulled aside into a back room while shopping, and my contact would come to gather intel and then talk down to me. And the words, "we are very..."
See what I'm saying? The contact would come to gather intel. So I guess, once again, huge fan of Neelam, but I think maybe because Neelam, like I've been a content creator since I was 18. I'm 28 now, so I just know how these things work. Sometimes if you haven't been a content creator for that long, you haven't been in like the industry itself, like the fashion industry for that long, you won't realize that someone collecting insights from you all the time for free is that's not, it shouldn't be for free. That's consulting. What you're doing is consulting for the brand. That should not be free, and they certainly shouldn't be making those demands of you if you don't want to give them that information. That's a bit insane.
Disappointed in you were used often. Now keep in mind, I'm in the store, I'm a paying client, and I'm about 15 to 20 years older than most of them. But I was being spoken to like I was a petulant child. One particular visit to the store really stands out. So I was in the change room and my rep approached me, and he said the head of PR, and he used his name but I'd rather not, is very upset with you. He said that I'd linked a pair of shoes that were too similar to the Rose, and that I shouldn't have done that. A whole bunch of things bothered me about this right away.
Oh, that's problematic. That's problematic. Oh my god. So they started to see her as like she's like she's someone who's really passionate about fashion and just happened to be a collector of the Row and really passionate about the Row. What does that have to do with what she can and can't post? So they were trying to control, they're like, oh, the shoe that you posted is very similar to the Row. Take it down, or you can't post stuff like that. That is insane. Yeah, at that point, that should have been the end of it. The fact that she continued talking to them after that is insane. She should have kicked the Row to the curb from then. Especially because I've talked about this before, but a lot of the Rose pieces you can get from many other brands, whether that's Jill Sander or Yohji Yamamoto. I mean, they rip off a lot of these brands anyway. Phoebe Philo. So you don't have to buy the Row. Like, there's so many other brands that are so close that it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I think from when they started to try and control what she can and can't post because they're saying it's too similar to the Row, as if she's some like ambassador of the Row, like official ambassador of the Row. Those are the kind of parameters you put in place for someone that is contractually obligated to wear a brand with a non-compete. So like if I'm a Nike athlete and then I post an Adidas, me wearing Adidas, my Nike rep can literally call me and be like, well, you're contractually obligated to wear Nike and you can't wear competitors, so can you take that Adidas thing down? That would make sense. But them treating her like that with no like contract in place is insane. That's insane.
First of all, being in a change room, you're already a little vulnerable. You're half dressed. It's uncomfortable. Second, I'm a client in the store spending my money. And third, there was a client in the room next to me and we're only separated by curtains, so she's listening. I gently pushed back. I explained I have aspirational followers. I always link both the Row and other items that carry similar aesthetic because it makes them happy, and not everyone can afford to buy the Row, and at some point they may buy the Row, so it isn't really a bad thing. I also earn commissions from those links, and this is how I sustain my business. I mean, to be honest, I was actually quite surprised that the Row felt threatened by the likes of Cause and Jeffrey Campbell. So after I left the store, I wrote an email to my senior contact just expressing the frustration with what was becoming a pattern of disrespectful behavior. I reminded her that I'm not an employee. I'm not a content creator for them either. I'm a paying client, and I'm not theirs to be told what to do. I also said I'd been accommodating, and so she apologized, but her primary concern was that I keep silent on the matter and tell no one, and she repeated that message. And in between incidents like this, there were moments
Whoa. Pause. Why did she let all this stuff happen? Why are they telling her what to do with no contract? What? Why did they even think they could tell her what to do? There's no contract in place. She's not a contractually obligated, ambassador for the Row. If anything, she was a customer. This is how they were treating a client, and one of their most prominent clients. This might be the most insane thing that I've heard. And this is why, and I've said this in the past, that the Row does make me cringe a bit, because I just associate the Row with like a certain level of I've gone into this before many times before, but like it's things like this that makes me cringe about the Row. It's not even that original of a brand for them to have all these parameters and start harassing their own clients. What is going on here?
calm, but then more trespasses. But there were no more apologies after that. And sometimes I'd be berated in front of other senior staff. Once, while I was in a Paris showroom many years ago, I remember one time I had tagged Bergdorf. My contact was furious. There were a pair of sold-out pants that had come back at Bergdorf's, and I used the only photo I had of myself, and that was taken at their store, and I linked the pants. The story was seen internally, reported back, and I was told off. Now, Before anyone gets their knickers in a knot, I do understand it's a privilege to be able to take a photo in their precious space. It was my oversight, and I apologized. I wasn't actually thinking about that at the time. I was just excited because the pants.
No, no, no. I don't agree with her. No, 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 no. It's not a privilege to take a picture in their space, because the reason why the row is successful is because of their customers. Without customers, brands aren't anything. So if you're one of their most prominent clients, and you're one of the most prominent customers of the row, and ambassadors, and when I say ambassador, I don't mean like officially, I just mean like someone that talks about the row publicly a lot and people look to your opinion, then they should be happy that you're with them or you're in their space. It shouldn't be the other way around. You shouldn't feel like, yes, I know it's a privilege. Unfortunately, I love her, but I think she's a bit of a pushover. Like, she let the row get away with already all these things. I would have kicked them to the curb already. She let them get away with way, way, way too much. And I don't think we're halfway through the video yet. And I'm already getting mad about the kind of stuff that they're asking of her. Like, this is insane.
Brought a stock and they came back in, and I wanted my audience to get them. Meanwhile, my friends and family continually reminding me in the back that I'm a paying client and none of this is okay. When I called the store later that same week to place a significant order with them, on the phone I was told, "We heard what you did. The row expects your loyalty, Neelam. You should be tagging us all the time and sending everyone to your New York City rep." And I remember thinking, if I'm not...
Once again, I hope she addresses this, but was there a contractual agreement? If there's no contractual agreement, how can the row say, "We expect your loyalty"? Kick them to the curb. Like, what? How can the row say they expect your loyalty? Kick them to the curb and just start buying Phoebe Philo. Like, what is that rubbish? Just kick them to the curb and start buying Yoji and Jill Sander and Phoebe Philo. Like, how can you be one of their most prominent clients? You spend your own hard-earned money on the brand and they're telling you what to do, and they're telling you, "We expect your loyalty." They're not supposed to have control over what you can post or what you say or what you want to wear. No, she let way too much slide. Way too much slide. I didn't even know it was this bad. This is way worse than I thought it was. This is crazy.
Not loyal, who is? I think that was part of the problem. I didn't set proper boundaries. I'd bend and apologize. I was kind.
Thank you. At least she owned up to it. She didn't set boundaries. She is apologizing. Don't apologize. Don't apologize. Do not apologize.
Accommodating, and they knew I loved their line. And it got to the point that between the random texts and phone calls and the reprimands, I became very anxious to post anything, always kind of second-guessing myself. And my true voice was diluted through their dictation and attempts to control. And I was always trying to balance the needs of my audience with the needs of the row. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, like, why I did any of this. I mean, maybe you're thinking I would have walked away. Why did you stay? Well, it's partly my upbringing. I'm a minority, and I was raised in a small, impoverished white town, and I learned compliance for safety very early in life. I'm also Canadian, and we're unfailingly polite. And I was...
Okay, so that explains a lot of it. It's probably a cultural thing, because I was like, why did she kick them to the curb this whole time? Like, I'm not rich, but if I was rich and I was like someone that could afford the row, considering how expensive the row is, there are way too many alternatives for any kind of brand to try and tell me what to do. Like, if the row is trying to tell me what to do, I'm kicking them to the curb. And I'm just buying Phoebe Philo and Jill Sander and Yoji Yamamoto and Cos if I want to like go down to like Cos. And I'm buying whatever else is on the market, Bottega Veneta. Like, why do you have to force yourself to buy a brand where they're literally controlling your every move? Like she said, she felt like she was balancing the needs of her audience with the needs of the row. And at that point, that means that your voice is not 100% authentic, because a lot of your voice or a lot of what your opinions are being filtered through this corporate machine that is the row. And the whole point of, at least to me, being like a content creator, being an independent voice, is that you can say what you want. You're supposed to, like for me, I always feel like my responsibility is with my audience and no one else. So if I review something, I have a responsibility to give my truest thoughts to my audience and not have that be filtered through a corporation. So you should never ever allow a company to do that, because I think that destroys what the whole point of like having an independent platform is. Otherwise, I might as well be Vogue. But anyway, let's continue watching.
taught respect. I admired the Row's work, and I felt I had an obligation to represent them well. When Vogue published that infamous Margaux article and Jenner stepped out in full Row and they acquired new investors, things changed over there rapidly. I remember having a quick conversation with my contact. She was saying how exciting it was, and I was excited for them. They were growing very quickly. I didn't have as much contact with her after that. And, we stayed in touch. It was very friendly. I'd ask questions now and then. She'd ask me questions, but it wasn't like it was before. And privately, I was dealing with a personal emergency. We developed a close relationship over the years, so I knew things about them, and they knew what was happening with me. My mom had been diagnosed with a very aggressive form of brain cancer a few years ago, and she died earlier this year. So it was a very painful ordeal for our family. This past September, October was Paris Fashion Week, and I was faced with a decision to make. Do I stay back or return to some sense of normalcy after months of grieving? I also wanted to make sure I was still welcome in the showroom because I didn't want to assume anything. So I messaged my contact, and she said, yes, come. But when I arrived in Paris, I couldn't get a hold of her to confirm the timing. And the one message I did receive was a little cryptic, something to the effect of, we're very busy, we'll see, maybe 15 minutes. Now, had I known that earlier, I wouldn't have traveled, especially given the circumstances, but there I was. And by sheer coincidence, I ran into her in the lobby of a hotel neither one of us were staying at. She's a bit cold, and she told me that she was with a client. We spoke about my mom briefly, but I told her I didn't want to take up too much of her time, and I just wanted to know what my time slot was and whether the new no influencers in the showroom policy was at play here at all. And this is where things really turned. Responded with a very big sigh and said, Neelam, I like you, but all the stuff that comes with Neelam. I think I froze, simply trying to ascertain the details of a showroom appointment I was invited to but told nothing about. Unfortunately, she continued with a condescending tone. Which one are you? Are you an influencer? Or are you a client? I told her I wore two hats. I told her I was a client, but I'm also a content creator who sends people to the Row. So then she launched into a tirade of accusations. She said, we cannot confirm this. You don't send anyone to the Row. And in fact, we hear you tell people not to shop at the Row. It's like, all of this is patently false, of course. I told her this, and I told her not only do I tell people to visit the stores, but because each one is unique and lovely, I tell them who I work with in each of the boutiques. I even did an entire video.
Okay, let's pause there. She definitely brings people to the Row. I don't know who that person she's talking about is, but that person literally doesn't have two brain cells. Everyone with two brain cells knows that she's definitely responsible for uplifting the Row, making it more popular. The reason why so many people bought the Row is because of her, because some people are on the fence and then she might talk about something or style something a certain way. And then because of that, they'll be like, okay, I'm going to buy the Row. Like, everyone knows that. It's common sense. Everyone knows that. I just think she needs to learn to put her foot down. And I'm a big fan of hers, but that's my goal as a journalist or as someone that speaks on these things is to speak the truth. She needs to learn to put her foot down. You cannot let... And I'm just saying this because she might watch this video and I'm a huge fan of her content, like huge fan. We love Neelam because she's super stylish. She has a strong point of view and she has taste. That can come through any brand. It doesn't need to be the Row. I will definitely continue watching her content regardless of what brand she wears because her taste level is so high that it doesn't matter. She's going to look good and she's going to give people style inspo regardless of, the brand that she wears. So she just needed to not have so much love for a brand, especially a brand that's treating you that badly, a brand that you're spending your hard-earned money on, and they're just like telling you what to do and accusing you of things. And this sounds like a toxic ex. Literally, this is sounding like a toxic ex. So yeah, this is crazy. This is crazy. I've worked in the industry since I was 18. Like I've said, I'm 28 now. I don't think I've ever had this kind of experience with a brand. Like some brands I critique quite harshly, and the PRs for all these brands just understand that that's my role as a journalist. Like I'm supposed to critique things. So they don't care. I've never ever had a brand be like, oh, you have to say something like this or you have to do it this way. And if they tried, I'll just be like, no. And there's nothing they can do about it. There really isn't anything they can do about it. So I think she just needs to learn that they don't have as much power as she thinks they do. They can't really do anything. So she shouldn't have let them get away with all the stuff they got away with. Like, this is way too much stuff.
Dedicated to talking about why I love the Row and talked about each of the boutiques. Paris wasn't open at the time. I did say, though, that if people come to me for advice or if they've taken my time, I share my commissionable links because that's how I earn my income. So unlike other stylists, I don't charge by the hour. I offer my Substack chat subscribers access to me, and if I take the time to answer them or they use my community to make decisions, a community that took a lot of time and energy to create, then I share my commissionable links. She said she saw how much business I was sending to my Teresa. She said I was so successful that she's seen the numbers and that I may as well keep linking because we're not hiring you for this job. I found the conversation kind of jarring. The row items are expensive and my income goes back into purchases, which I then review and share with my audience. That then influences more people to purchase, and either way I feel the row wins. Yes, of course they'd like to earn their full margins and have me direct all the traffic to them because...
So that's what happens when brands get greedy, because ultimately what she was doing was a net positive for the row. So for them to see it any other way, they're just stupid. If they see it any other way, they're just dumb. So it's like if someone is constantly spending their own money. First of all, I'm just saying this is how it looks to an audience. If I spend my money on something, my audience is going to think, okay, he cares about that enough to spend his own money on it. He's clearly into it. Now, if I'm reviewing it and I'm saying how good it is, if that's the taste of someone, people trust my opinion because it's like, okay, you spent your money and you're saying it's good and you weren't paid to say this was good or bad or whatever. So, and she was spending her own money constantly and constantly saying, you know, oh, this piece is really good. Oh, I really like this piece. How could that possibly not be a net positive for the row? But they're just like, because you're, instead of, you know, linking affiliate links to us, you're doing it through My Teresa. Well, sorry, you guys didn't set up an affiliate program for one of the most influential people that wears the row on the internet. Like, it's so stupid. Like, if I had a brand and someone was like spending a lot of money on my brand and they had a really strong audience that was, you know, talking about my brand, wearing my brand, discussing it, I would just create an affiliate program specifically for that person. So we can even gauge what percentage of the customers are actually coming from this one person also. That would be good research and like data to have. So for them to be greedy, kind of neglect or negate all the stuff that she did for the row and then turn around and say, you might as well work for My Teresa because that's where all your affiliate links are going to. That's insane. That is insane.
If I direct to third-party retailers, they have to share their profits. Their margin gets cut, and they don't like that. They wanted me to direct all traffic to them, even if it meant foregoing my own earnings. But that's not for them.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. They don't care if she makes money from it or not. They wanted all her traffic to go directly to the row. Meanwhile, they didn't pay her. All this insight they got from her, and I get it. This is what happens when you're like, you haven't been in the industry for this long, so you don't understand that you giving these people all this information is consulting. I get paid good money to do this for brands. Like, if brands want to start picking my brain, I send them an invoice and I get paid before I start sharing insights. The row should never, ever, ever have been able to keep asking you for insights and telling you what to do without payment. Like, it just shouldn't have happened.
To decide. If I'm working, I feel I should be able to earn an income. That seems reasonable. What isn't reasonable is being spoken to like this by a longtime contact turned friend in a public setting shortly after we talked about my mom about a showroom that I'd been invited to. And the messaging was consistent across all senior contacts that I don't do enough for them. She told me I could come to the showroom, but that if I was coming as a client only, not as an influencer, and that I was to be quiet because they like things quiet. And she gestured my way with her hands and said, "This is not for us." So I thanked her for her time, and after I left, she messaged to tell me she'd reserved the best time slot for me at the showroom, and that if I stayed a day longer, I could have the entire showroom to myself to explore. But I declined. I have no...
Finally, she declined. Thank goodness. What I don't understand is they said that they feel like she doesn't do enough. What do they want her to do for the brand? I'm so lost. Like, she gave them insights for free. She was helping them out for free. She was pushing customers to them for free. What else? Do they want her to be like Superwoman? Like, what else do they expect from her? I don't understand.
No issues with the fact that they want different people around the brand now and that they no longer have a desire for the rest of us. They want people like Kendall. It's their business. That's their choice. And in fact, they probably need her more than anyone else because they have new investors and they need a new generation of clients. It is hypocritical, though, because her name isn't really synonymous with restraint. And what I take issue with is how I've been spoken to over the years, especially in Paris. I experienced a blatant misuse of power within the relationship. And after I wrote the open letter, I received messages from other content creators, Row clients, business partners, and people from inside the industry all sharing their own experiences. So it feels like this is a much larger problem. If we're going to talk about entitlement, we should talk about the Rows. There was a sense that they had the right to demand things from me, that my loyalty meant silence. I often felt policed. And one of the ways this story has really been twisted is that it's being framed as an influencer who is upset because their access or privileges were taken away. But that's untrue.
Okay, so this is what she was referring to at the start, where she said that people didn't, ask her, and then people kind of ran with their own story. So that's interesting that people ran that narrative. I didn't see people, at least on my circle of fashion, I didn't see people running with that narrative, but that's interesting.
Let's be clear about what access actually means. If you're a VIC, which is what they've referred to me as, it's someone with a significant spend. You're offered certain things. You might get extended holds or items brought in just for you, pieces sent on approval, meaning you decide what you want to keep in return and they charge you after. You might get VIP access to the sample sale, which I did. You might get a seat at a runway show. I've been to a couple, like other clients and content creators have. You might get access to the showroom. Again, I have, like other clients and other content creators. In fact, I've met a few of the content creators there in their showroom. But what seemed to be unique to me was what came with those privileges. The demands, the condescension, the talking down to, the humiliation, the lack of respect. As the brand grew more powerful, the demands grew too. So no, this wasn't about access. In fact, in Paris, I declined the access because in the end, my priority is always the relationship. I've heard this question a lot too. Like, why didn't you speak up sooner? Well, I've talked about that before, but for me, pushing back against power has always been difficult. Again, a lot to do with my upbringing. But what happened?
Didn't she say she worked in finance? What's this issue with pushing back against power? I don't understand. I just don't understand that culturally. Like, I also was raised to, be respectful to people. But if people are just taking the rice and peas, if people are taking the baked beans, if people are taking the piss, then it gets to a point where that respect is no longer mutual. When respect is no longer mutual, you kick people to the curb. That's how you behave. Like, my default is to be respectful to people, but if people are disrespectful to me, then I kick them to the curb. That's how you're supposed to. And if you work in finance, I would have thought that, because in finance, you're supposed to be very rough and tough and very, you know what I mean? Supposed to put your foot down and not be a pushover, because at least from my friends that I know that work in finance, there's always that person that's trying to take advantage. So you have to be on your toes the whole time. But anyway, let's continue watching.
In Paris was egregious, and I was a bit changed because I no longer had my mom. And when someone significant in your life dies, it changes you profoundly. I found a new voice, and that's the voice that came through in the open letter. There's been a lot of commentary around money, too, that I made a killing off the row, so let's be clear about how this work functions. I started talking about something I loved purely as a hobby at a stage in my life when I had the space to do that. Organically, it turned into a career. On YouTube, when I started, I was a small fish. I'm still not that big relative to other accounts, and I wasn't even monetizing my channel for a very long time. I had forgotten to turn that feature on. And so the idea that I made a fortune there is simply untrue. And the same goes for Substack. The number you see next to my name is my total subscribers, not paid. I have paid subscribers, but it's a fraction of that. So like most creators, I rely primarily on paid partnerships and commissionable links, and I'm selective. I turn down a lot because alignment matters to me. Linking is pretty standard in our industry. We link third-party retailers or other brands that participate in those platforms. And I don't believe creators should have to defend earning an income. I mean, I know it looks fun, and many days it is. That's how it started.
I think the main issue here is I don't think she understands how the whole system works. Like, the Rose shouldn't have even been talking to you about what you should or shouldn't be doing. That's like the first thing. So she should never have even been in a conversation around, trying to justify to a brand whether you can or can't make an earning. Like, I've literally never had that happen in my entire time working in fashion. Like, and it just won't happen. I don't even see how that could happen. I actually don't even see a situation where that could even happen.
Joyful, but it's still work. And further, as a brown woman in an industry dominated by younger white women, it's really hard to make a space for yourself. I do want to say this. I'm grateful for my time with the Row because I did benefit from covering them. They were growing at a time I was growing, and as they grew, I grew. So, yeah, it was helpful, but it doesn't negate how they were treating me. Some people have wondered why an open letter, why not just deal with it privately? Well, because my contact was so senior. And when behavior's coming from the top, there's no private resolution left. And this needed to be said. This is an industry filled with women, including minority women, and speaking up matters if we want things to change. This isn't about dragging anyone or tearing anything down. It's simply about telling the truth from my seat and trusting that people can actually sit with this complexity. And I know a lot of you out there saying, well, how naive that you didn't know they were elitists from the beginning. But listen, that was not my experience from the beginning. Over time, and maybe it just took me a while to get there, I learned a little more. Also, I have friends that are designers. They use beautiful fabrics, they pay fair wages, and they design slowly with intention. And their pieces are pricey, but they're some of the nicest people in the industry. So I think the two can coexist. It's not hard to be nice. And one would think that part of what we're paying for is the service. It seems like we've gone from customer-based prestige to status-based exclusion. And I don't know why that shift gets excused. Why should loyal clients have to tolerate mistreatment and just accept it as part of the experience? In the aftermath of the open letter, I received a range of direct messages, and you know what stood out to me? Was how quickly some people are moving to defend this powerful establishment against the...
Yeah, so the reason why people defend the Row is because there's so many people. It's like, it's the same kind of person that you know the kind of person that politically votes for things that don't benefit them. It benefits like people that are richer than them, but they vote for those things because in their mind they're like, well, I'm going to be that rich someday, even though statistically most of them don't get there. It's like just a fallacy in their mind. So they're like, well, I'm going to vote for those things because in 10 years I'm going to be those rich people, so I don't want to vote against my future self. That's basically what this is, the fashion version of that, where these guys are like, well, I don't want anyone to spoil the Row for me when I can afford it in 10 years, all those kind of things. So yeah, people like that are just so annoying. Like, you shouldn't be defending corporations, especially when they do bad things. Like, there's no reason to defend a massive corporation.
Count of one individual, and many times with undertones that I'm really uncomfortable with. They're very racially charged comments. It made me curious, like, what is it people are actually defending in those moments? The people behind the brand or the idea of the brand itself and the values we project onto it? Something else that surprised me in all of this was how defensiveness can turn into fabrication. I've seen some comments saying I'm rude to people in my interactions. Listen, I have receipts. When I encounter rudeness, I typically don't engage. I block and I move on. But I feel like we're living in a time where anyone can say anything online and there's very little accountability for it. I did a Q&A on Instagram and the questions about how I move forward came up. So one of the most difficult parts of coming forward here was knowing how much I loved their clothes. So I'm breaking up with a brand whose work I admire so much and feels very me. You know, it's that love that kind of brought me here in the first place. It's why I started the channel and why I stepped into the work. So what will look different is how I shop and how I speak about what I'm wearing. So I can divorce the people from the craft. I still understand their products. I've had years of experience, and I think my perspective is still useful to my audience. And to be honest, removing linking would only harm my business. So this is part of my income, and it supported my family during a really difficult time. So I'm going to continue to cover them uncensored now. I want to balance this with other brands, of course, and I know we vote with our dollars. I'll buy less overall. I'll buy through third-party retailers.
I'm surprised that she's still buying the Row. Why is she still buying it? Once again, the Row's aesthetic you can find in so many other brands. But I do like that now she's like, I'm going to cover it unbiased without, the chirping noise coming from the brand. And that's what I was saying from the start. I'm like, why didn't you just do that from the start? Like, why do you let them get away with them telling you to do anything? No brand to be able to tell you to do anything. That's absolutely insane. I think ultimately, and this is why I'm confused about, like, once again, because she said she works in finance. Like, when it comes to businesses will always try to get away with as much as they can. It even happens to me. Like, I might negotiate a deal or negotiate like a fee with a company, and let's say they have, I don't know, a 5K budget. And then they're like, we have a 1K budget, because they just want to see if I'm going to accept it. Like, it's just gay. This is literally business. So it's up to me to be like, no, I'm not going to do it for 1K. And then they're going to go back and pretend like they're deliberating between each other, even though they know they have a 5K budget. Then they're going to come back and be like, okay, we have 3K. We've discussed with our clients, and our client is now saying we can bring the fee up to 3K. And me having so much experience with what kind of brand has what kind of budget, and I'll be like, I'm not doing it for 3K. And then they're like, oh, this is going to be hard. I don't know, but we're going to try our best to go back to the client. And then they pretend to go back to the client. And they're like, after a lot of discussion with the client has now decided last to offer a fee of 5K. And I'm like, yeah, I'll accept that. Because I know it's just a game. It's just the game. So that's how business is. So if you're working with any kind of company, it's up to you, the individual, to decide where you put your foot down, or where you say no, or when you say no, or how much you let them get away with. That's up to you as an individual. No one else can do it. So they will only, that's why they were asking her for the insights, because she was giving it to them without saying no. She was giving it to them without asking for money. If it was me, they would have asked me to give them the insights, and I would have been like, no, here's how much it costs. And they would have had to pay it. And if they didn't pay, I just wouldn't give them the insight. Simple. Like, that's how she should start treating all her conversations with brands. And I hope that if she watches this, because this is from a good place. Like, I love her. Like, I literally love her work. Big fan of hers. But I just think that these things are, because clearly there's no one saying this. So it's like, these things are very important to say and for people to know, not just for her, but, you know, for everyone watching, that this is how it works. Businesses will just try to see how much they can get away with for free, because why not? Why not? That's just how they think.
On sale mostly and pre-owned, because their pricing has become even more absurd. There's lots to consider, and I'm moving through this imperfectly, I guess. I'm going to close off here. Holidays are right around the corner. I know it's a tough one for a lot of you, and it's definitely a tough one for our family. I hope you have a restful holiday, and I hope to see you on the other side. Take care.
Okay, that was a really hard watch. It's quite sad, considering that she was such a good ambassador for the brand, in my opinion, that's how they treated her. I think that's absolutely insane. I'm just still confused why she still wants to buy more from the row. I just say, like, kick that brand to the curb and just, like, don't even wear it. Obviously, she owns pieces, but I mean, don't buy more stuff. Don't buy new stuff from the brand. I think there's so many other brands that offer that aesthetic. It's not like the row is, what's a brand that has a really distinctive aesthetic that you can't get anywhere else? Like Water Van Beirendonk. Like if you were a fan of Water Van Beirendonk and then you decided, okay, I need to look for an alternative, that will be kind of hard to find an alternative to Water Van Beirendonk that's really similar. But the row is not one of those brands, to be honest. The row really isn't one of those brands that's like hard to find alternatives. Someone says maybe she feels some type of connections to the row. Maybe by still buying the company will change and respect her. We both know that's not going to happen, because she has publicly, I won't say ousted, but she's publicly spoken on the brand and, like, you know, the issues she has with the brand. And even this YouTube video just adds on it. So there's always going to be animosity with her and the row forever. It's just how it's going to be now, especially because this video is public. So that's just not going to happen. There's no amount of money she can spend that will completely perfect her relationship with the row. It's not going to happen. Yes, she's had a major loss already, so it's probably just hard for her to sever ties. Yeah, and it is obviously sad that she went through loss, but I think it's important to note that she should have severed ties a long time ago, before anything else happened, before she unfortunately lost a family member and all these things. There were things that they were doing in the past that should have led to her severing ties. So yeah, the row sounds like they do coke. That's insane. I feel like the row is very West Coast coded. It's like a West Coast point of view on East Coast fashion. Yeah. I don't agree with how she handled it, but I can see character traits that are holding her back. Yeah, I really hope if she watches this that she doesn't keep buying the row. That's just my biggest hope. I just think that if you keep buying the row, you're essentially indirectly okaying everything that they did and just not putting your foot down. So that's crazy. I really hope she doesn't put so much of a focus on that brand anymore. I mean, I think she will progressively phase it out of her life. I don't know. That's up for her to decide. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of react to this because obviously we did cover the Substack. So it's good to have an update of her kind of explaining the story from her point of view. I think that, I mean, I'm part of her audience personally, and I think that I don't care what brand she wears. Like I said, I think that her taste level is so high. I just want to know how she styles anything. It could be Bottega, it could be Josanda, it could be Kate, it could be Cos, it could be, I don't know, Phoebe Philo, it could be Peter Doe, it could be Daniel Lee's Burberry. I don't care. I think she's going to look good regardless, and I just want to see how she's going to wear it. So I just don't, this reliance on the row, I just don't think is necessary. And as someone that's part of her audience, I don't think that everything has to be the row. And if it's not the row, like her audience won't be that interested. I don't agree with that, to be honest. Know your worth, because these brands will appropriate your style and knowledge for their own advantage 100%. 100%. Yeah, she can definitely pivot. She just has to take the jump. Totally agree. At this point, you need to invoice her a management fee and introduce her to a brand called Whispers. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Hermes by Margiela, Vintage Armani, 100%. Please invite her for an interview not regarding the row on your channel. Okay, I will invite her to an interview. Whether she accepts it or not is a whole totally different thing. But if I invite her to an interview, it will just be to talk about fashion generally and not to like keep beating a dead horse and talk about this issue. Because I can imagine it's traumatic for her to keep talking about it and thinking about it. So I don't want to be one of those people that keeps having to bring it up. But yeah, I'll reach out to her after the stream. But yeah, anyway, that's the whole story with the row. More reasons to not like the row. If you weren't already, you know, on my side of the fence with the fact that the row copies so many brands that I talk about all the time, especially one of my favorite brands, Yohji Yamamoto. That's why the row as a brand for me, it's just a bit, as someone like the first fashion designer I ever learnt about was Yohji Yamamoto. The first like semi-expensive thing I ever bought was a Y3 jacket that I still own. So for me, the row is always going to be icky because it's like they just copy Yohji. So for me, it's just always going to be an icky brand anyway. But yeah, those are my personal thoughts. You don't have to agree. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.